So if any of you have been following, I tested positive on Saturday, the 9th of January, with an antigen test at Paramount Studios. And my result came back positive. And so I was like, whoa, what? I don't know. I'm gonna check this out. I'm gonna follow up. So I went to urgent care and got another antigen test on Sunday, the 10th. It came back negative. Okay. So I thought, okay, so yeah, right. So I didn't work on Monday, which was the job that I was supposed to work for Paramount, because of course, as soon as you test positive with an antigen test, you're kicked off the job and Central and your agents for at least 9 days. So I went in again on Monday just to make sure, just to really make sure, and I could get as many tests as I wanted. So I got another antigen test, and I decided to get a nasal swab for a PCR test. And I don't know why, with all the research I've done all year, I hadn't realized this one little obvious crazy fact that an antigen test is not the same as a PCR test for COVID-19. And an antigen test will pick up anything in the coronavirus family, anything, anytime that you may have it. It does not say that you have COVID SARS-2, COVID-19 SARS-2, got it? So that's what we're using to get tested hundreds and thousands of times a week here in Hollywood with all the studios, okay? So I'd go and get the PCR test, and they're gonna send it in, because this PCR test takes 3 to 5 days to get a result. So I'm like, wow. So then my mind started working, right? So I could really be sitting here without COVID-19, possibly a false positive, or have a cold that came false positive on the antigen test. So I'm on my way home, and the urgent care calls me, and she says, hey, Felix, so listen, you got a positive on the antigen. This is the one that's the rapid one that we use all the time. And I said, oh, really? Okay, you know what? I do have a tickle in my throat. So I guess that's it. She said, yeah, you should probably, quarantine and, rest and stuff and see how it goes. So I was like, okay, so I go to the store, I go to Trader Joe's, I buy stuff to hunker down. And I get home and I strap myself in and get ready. I get ready for COVID-19, people. And that night, I got a little bit more congestion in my throat. It wasn't a cold, a dry cough, as they say. It was more wet. And I had a little bit of sinus stuff, not a lot. And in the middle of the night, I felt my temperature spike a minute. And I checked it, and it was 98.8. My normal is 97.6. So I did feel a little achy, and I knew that I was fighting something. And so that broke in a couple hours. I got up the next day, and I had a cough, and I didn't feel great, but nothing different than my seasonal cold or flu that normally happens this time of year. And here I am, a recovered COVID-19 patient at 58 and a half years old. Yes, I have no underlying conditions. I am on no medications. I have no comorbidities. I exercise, I dance. I have done fitness my whole life. I have watched my health my whole life because I couldn't afford to get on the insurance big pharma merry-go-round my whole life because I was in an industry where we could never afford adequate insurance pretty much. And then the next one, I'll tell you more about my results on Friday from the lab. So I started calling the lab because now the PCR test I'm waiting for, this is Monday or Tuesday, and I start calling the lab, and I call urgent care, and I ask them, can you tell me what the PCR cycle rate threshold is going to be on this PCR that you guys are taking from me? And no one I tell you, no one on the front lines at urgent care, from the nurses to the doctor himself there, to the lab that I called, and all the people who answered the phones knew what a PCR cycle threshold for the COVID-19 test was. Now, this is a really vital piece of information, and nobody knows what it is, okay? And I do, and I barely graduated high school, okay? But I've done my homework, and I've done my research, and I've read the papers. I'm talking to the head of the lab, and he explains to me that he cycled that it was cycled at 40. Now, originally they told me that it depended on the patient and went from patient to patient. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I don't understand why a test for something that's going to give you a negative or a positive would adjust per patient. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't sound right to me. But they told us that they were not supposed to give us that information. And this is my bodily fluid. This is my test. I'm the patient, okay? But this doctor ended up being sent from God, and he leveled with me and explained it all to me of how he tested me and that it was a 40 cycle threshold rate that he used, which typically is too high. It should be 35 and lower from all the studies and what scientists say, because you will get at 40, at 35 and above, you'll get false positives on the PCR test for COVID-19, okay? So he explained it to me, and I said, so doctor, you telling me that the antigen tests are not telling us if we have COVID? They're just telling us if we have a cold, correct? And he said, yes. So I told him my story and what I do for a living and being here in Hollywood. And he said, off the record, the studios, the producers, the directors, and the unions won't listen to the doctors that they're taking advice from. I have doctors telling me all the time they're pulling their hair because we have told them, after someone tests positive on an antigen, you are not to test them again for 90 days because they will continue to get false positives because your body is still shedding the virus. So it makes no sense to continue to test, but they are. So basically what we are testing for is a cold. Stuff that we used to work through in a normal year on a set, okay? And that's why when I go do a TV show, I have to have an antigen test, which tells me if I have a cold or not. Doesn't even tell me if we have COVID-19. But if I shoot a SAG commercial, same union, all I have to do is have my temperature checked in the morning when I get to the set. How does this make any sense?